She sat in silence, her hands shaking just a little. The room was quiet, but inside her mind, a storm was roaring. She looked up, her eyes soft yet full of pain, and said the words she had carried for years. "I can't be a mother." Her voice cracked, almost like the sound of something breaking deep inside her chest. She wasn't just saying it to him. She was saying it to herself, again, trying to make peace with the truth she never wanted. He didn't answer right away. He didn't rush to fix her pain or say she was wrong. He just watched her, the woman who had built walls around her heart because it was easier than watching them fall again. His eyes didn't hold pity, only something else, something warm. She turned her face away, ashamed of the words she had spoken. They felt heavy, unforgivable. She had seen mothers in parks, mothers in stories, mothers in her dreams. And every time she'd whispered to herself, "That's not me, it can never be me." It wasn't that she didn't want it. She wanted it too much. But life had other plans, and after enough disappointments, even dreams start to fade. He took a slow breath, still quiet. She thought he'd leave like others had. Who would stay with someone who came with an empty cradle and a heart too tired to try again. But instead, he smiled. It wasn't a wide grin. It was soft, real, like he understood a secret she didn't. "You know," he said finally, his voice low but steady, "I've got 3 calling you Mama already." Her eyes widened. For a moment, she didn't understand. Was he joking? Trying to make her feel better, but there was no joke in his tone. No pity, only truth. And something inside her shifted. She blinked, searching his face, trying to read what he meant. 3, calling her Mama. But she had never held a baby. Never heard the word Mama meant for her. Still, there was something about the way he said it, calm, sure, as if the story had already been written and she just hadn't read that chapter yet. The air felt different now. Her heart, still cautious, beat a little faster. Something was about to change, she just didn't know how much. She had spent years believing that her body had betrayed her. Every doctor's visit, every test, every failed hope had carved a quiet scar inside her. People said time heals, but time only taught her how to pretend. She smiled when others announced pregnancies. She clapped at baby showers. She even held newborns, but always with that careful distance, afraid the softness of a baby's skin would break her heart all over again. There were nights when she'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, whispering silent questions to no one. Why me? What did I do wrong? Am I not meant for this? Those questions had no answers, only the echo of her own voice bouncing back. The silence after was louder than anything she had ever known. She told herself she'd moved on, that she'd stopped hoping. But hope has a way of hiding, of sitting quietly in the corner of your soul, waiting for a reason to rise again. When she met him, she wasn't looking for love. She had stopped looking for a long time. He was different though, not in the dramatic, movie kind of way, but in the way he listened. He didn't fill the air with promises. He didn't try to fix what he didn't understand. He just let her be. For the first time, she didn't feel like she had to explain the weight she carried. He never asked her to. Somehow, he already knew. Their conversations started simple. Coffee, music, work. Then slowly, they wandered into deeper places, childhood stories, fears, regrets, dreams that had been buried. She told him about her garden, the one she kept though nothing seemed to grow. He laughed softly and said maybe it was waiting for the right hands. She didn't understand what he meant then, but later she would. One evening, while they walked along an empty street after rain, she told him the truth. The truth she never shared easily. She said it quietly, her eyes fixed on the pavement, afraid to see his reaction. "I can't have children," she said. "I've tried. It's not possible for me." She waited for the pause, the kind that usually comes before people step back, the kind that means this is too much. But it didn't come. He stopped walking and she could feel his gaze on her even before she looked up. "Okay," he said simply, not with surprise, not with pity, just that okay. As if she had told him her favorite color or that she liked her coffee black. She felt anger rise for a second, mixed with confusion. "Did you hear what I said?" she asked, her voice almost breaking. "I did," he said. "And it doesn't change anything." She didn't know how to respond to that. She had built her identity around that missing piece, shaped her worth around what she couldn't give. How could it not change anything? In the days that followed, she found herself thinking about his reaction more than she wanted to. His calmness unsettled her. Maybe he didn't understand. Maybe he didn't care enough to realize what it meant. But when she looked at him, the way he treated people, the patience in his voice, the quiet strength in his silence, she realized it wasn't carelessness. It was acceptance. He wasn't pretending it didn't matter. He was saying she mattered more. Still, her fear didn't vanish overnight. The thought haunted her, what if he changes his mind? What if he wants a family someday and regrets me? The mind is cruel that way. It finds ways to ruin good things before they can bloom. One morning, she found him in the kitchen making breakfast. There was a small drawing on the fridge, a messy little sketch of a house, 2 stick figures, and 3 smaller ones with a big red heart in the middle. The paper looked like it had been handled by little hands. She stared at it for a long moment before asking, "Whose drawing is that?" He turned, a small smile forming on his face. "My kids," he said softly. Her throat went dry. "You have children," he nodded. "3, he said it with pride, but not in the way people brag. It was a quiet kind of pride, one built on love, not ownership. "They're not mine by blood," he added. "But they've been calling me Dad for years." She blinked, unsure how to react. "And their mother, she passed away," he said gently. "It's been a few years." Something in his tone made her chest tighten. The pain in his eyes was old but still alive. And yet beneath it there was warmth, the kind that only comes from love that never left. She didn't know what to say. All she could do was look at the drawing again. 5 stick figures. 3 small ones, one of them labeled Mama. Her heart skipped a beat. "Who's that?" she whispered. He followed her gaze and smiled faintly. "They drew it last week. They said they wanted to draw our family." "Our?" she repeated, the word catching in her throat. He stepped closer, his voice quiet but certain. "They've been asking about you. They like your voice. They've seen your picture. They say you look like a mom." She froze. The air seemed to thicken around her. She wasn't ready for this. Not this. "I told you," she said weakly. "I can't be," he interrupted softly. "I know, but maybe you already are." Those words hit something inside her she didn't know existed. She felt tears rise before she could stop them. For years, she had dreamed of someone calling her Mama asterisk, but the dream always ended in the same silence. And now, here he was telling her it had already happened. That night she couldn't sleep. She kept replaying his words in her head. "I've got 3 calling you Mama already." It sounded impossible, too good to be real. But somewhere deep inside, a door she thought was locked forever had started to open just a little. The next morning, she found herself standing in front of the mirror, looking at her reflection. She didn't look different, but something in her eyes had changed. Hope, small, uncertain, fragile but real. For the first time in a long time, she didn't turn away. She whispered to herself, not in doubt this time, but in wonder. Could I really be? The question lingered, like a light in the dark. He wasn't a man of many words. Most of what he said carried weight not because it was loud, but because it was true. He had lived a life that had been both kind and cruel, full of moments that broke him and others that pieced him back together again. Before she ever walked into his life, he had already known love, loss, and the kind of loneliness that sits quietly beside you at night and doesn't speak. His wife had been gone for years. Cancer, they said, quick and merciless. When she left, she didn't just take her laughter or her perfume from the house, she took color. The walls looked different, the air felt heavy, and even the light seemed dull. He was left standing in a home that once echoed with children's giggles, but had since turned into a museum of memories he couldn't touch. The kids were young, too young to understand why their mother wasn't coming back. He remembered the first night after the funeral. The youngest had crawled into his bed, clutching his shirt, whispering, "Daddy, when will Mama wake up?" He didn't have an answer, so he just held her tighter and let her tears soak into his chest. From that night on, he promised himself one thing: his children would never feel unloved. He became both mother and father. He packed lunches, braided hair badly, burned pancakes on school mornings, and learned to sing lullabies that cracked his voice but soothed their hearts. Every scraped knee, every nightmare, every "I miss Mama," he answered with patience. It wasn't easy. Some nights after they were asleep, he'd sit in the living room and stare at the old family photo on the wall. His wife's smile always met his eyes, and though she wasn't there, she seemed to whisper, "Keep going." Years passed. The kids grew, the pain softened but never disappeared. Friends tried to set him up again, saying things like, "You need someone," or "The kids need a mother." But he always shook his head. How could he let anyone fill a space that wasn't empty, just different? Until one day, someone crossed his path, someone who didn't try to fill the void, but understood what it meant to live with one. She came quietly into his world. No grand gestures, no promises. Just a presence, calm, gentle, familiar in a way that made him forget time. She didn't try to impress his kids, didn't force herself into their lives. Instead, she noticed the little things, the way the youngest hid behind her hair when nervous, the middle one's habit of humming while drawing, the eldest's careful silence that hid too much emotion. She didn't push, she just watched, and slowly they started watching back. The first time they met her, the house felt alive again. The youngest showed her a picture she'd drawn, shyly saying, "That's you." The middle one asked if she liked pancakes, and the eldest simply said, "Hi," which for him was a big deal. He watched it all unfold quietly from the kitchen doorway. There was something natural about it, as if the universe had been waiting for this moment just like him. Later that evening, as he walked her to her car, she looked at him with uncertainty. "They're wonderful," she said softly, "but I don't know if I could ever be what they need." He turned to her, his heart heavy with gratitude and understanding. "They don't need perfect," he said. "They just need love." She looked away then, her eyes glistening in the streetlight. "You don't understand," she whispered. "I can't have children." He smiled gently, the kind of smile that carried no surprise. "I know," he said, "but I've got 3 calling you Mama already." For a moment she didn't breathe. The words settled in the air between them, simple yet powerful. He wasn't trying to fix her pain, he was inviting her to belong. When he got home, his youngest was waiting on the couch, half asleep with a blanket around her shoulders. "Daddy," she mumbled, "is she gonna come back?" He smiled and kissed her forehead. "I hope so, sweetheart." In the following weeks she did come back, sometimes for dinner, sometimes just to talk. The children started saving her a seat at the table without being told. The house began to fill again, with laughter, warmth, and something he hadn't heard in a long time, joy. One afternoon he found his kids in the living room, giggling as they made another drawing. "What are you working on?" he asked, pretending not to know. "It's our family," the youngest said proudly, holding up the picture. There they were, 5 stick figures and a big red heart. "See, that's Mama." He smiled, feeling something deep inside him settle into peace. They didn't need explanations or DNA to know what love looked like. They already knew. That night when he called her, he told her about the drawing. She went silent for a long time before whispering, "They really called me that?" "Yes," he said softly. "They already see you that way." She didn't reply, but he could hear her breathing shaky, uneven, like someone trying not to cry. "Listen," he said gently, "you don't have to be what you think a mother should be. Just be yourself. That's all they need." There was another pause, and then she said something he'd never forget. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "Neither did I," he replied, "but love teaches you." He could almost feel her smile through the phone. When they hung up, he looked around the quiet house. For the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. He didn't feel like he was just surviving. Somewhere out there, a woman who thought she could never be a mother was slowly realizing that maybe she already was, not by birth, but by heart. And deep down, he knew, love had just begun rewriting their story. The night air was cool, and the street was quiet except for the sound of crickets. She stood by the gate, hesitating. He had invited her to dinner, nothing more, nothing less, but her heart felt like it was being tested. The house on the corner, his house, glowed softly from inside. Warm light spilled out of the windows, the kind that made a place feel alive. For years she had walked past homes like that, wondering what it must feel like to belong inside one. Tonight she was about to find out. When she knocked, the door opened before her knuckles could touch wood a second time. He was there, smiling as always, simple and calm, wearing an apron dusted with flour. "You're early," he said, half laughing. She wasn't. She had been outside for 10 minutes already, gathering courage. The smell of something baking drifted out, cinnamon, butter, and a hint of apples. She stepped in, her hands tucked nervously in her coat pockets. The house wasn't grand or fancy. It was real. There were drawings taped to the fridge, tiny shoes by the door, and a couch that looked loved, not new. Her heart softened instantly. Then she heard them. 3 small voices, muffled but excited, coming from down the hall. "She's here! She's here!" Tiny footsteps followed, and before she could process anything, 3 children stood in front of her. The youngest, with curls bouncing around her face, stared up with wide eyes. "Are you the lady who likes sunflowers?" she asked. She blinked, surprised. "How did you know that?" The little girl grinned. "Daddy told us. He said you smile when you see them." He chuckled behind her, scratching the back of his neck. "They asked what you liked. I might have said too much." The eldest, a boy about 9, looked more cautious. He didn't say much, just nodded politely. The middle child, a girl with serious eyes, held out a small piece of paper. "We made this," she said shyly. It was a drawing, her again, this time standing beside the kids, a big yellow sun shining above them. She couldn't speak for a second. She just looked at it, her throat tightening. The simple lines, the uneven colors, it was the most beautiful thing she'd seen in years. He noticed her silence and gently said, "Come on. Dinner's ready." They all sat at the table together. It felt awkward at first. The clinking of spoons filled the silence. The kids whispered, she smiled nervously, and he just watched with quiet patience. Slowly, though, the air began to ease. The youngest spilled some juice, and instead of freezing, she laughed. He handed her a towel, and soon the whole table was laughing too. Later, they played a card game. She didn't know the rules and kept losing on purpose, pretending to be dramatic about it. The kids thought it was hilarious. The middle one kept score proudly, while the eldest started to relax enough to tease her back. The laughter that filled the house that night wasn't loud, it was gentle, like the sound of something healing. When the kids finally went to bed, the house grew quiet again. She sat on the couch, holding a mug of tea he'd made. The warmth seeped into her fingers. "They're wonderful," she said softly. He nodded. "They are. And they already like you." She gave a small, uncertain smile. "I don't know what they see in me." He turned to her, his expression kind but serious. "They see what I see, someone who cares, someone who listens, someone who shows up." She looked down at the mug. "You make it sound so simple." "It is," he said. "Love doesn't need much, just truth." Silence sat between them for a moment, comfortable, not heavy. She thought of all the years she had spent convincing herself that she wasn't enough, that her worth had limits, that her heart was something she had to guard. But sitting there, in that room filled with laughter and the faint smell of apple pie, something inside her cracked open. Then came the sound that would stay with her forever. From the hallway, small footsteps padded softly. The youngest peeked around the corner, rubbing her eyes. "Daddy," she murmured. He smiled. "What is it, sweetheart?" The little girl looked at her, then whispered, "Can Mama tuck me in?" The word hit her like a heartbeat. Mama, it wasn't planned, it wasn't forced. It just happened, pure, honest, and real. She froze, unsure what to do. Her eyes darted to him, and he nodded gently, saying nothing. She stood up slowly, her legs trembling slightly. The little girl reached out a small hand, and she took it. They walked down the hall together, the soft light following them. In the bedroom, the girl climbed into bed and pulled the blanket up to her chin. "Thank you," she mumbled sleepily. "For what?" she asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. "For coming back," the child said. She smiled, brushing a strand of hair from the girl's forehead. "You're welcome." When she came back to the living room, he was waiting by the door, watching her. She didn't say anything, and neither did he. There were no words that could fit what she was feeling. She wasn't just a visitor anymore. They stood there in the quiet for a while. Then he walked closer and said softly, "You don't have to be afraid." You belong here if you want to." Her lips parted, but nothing came out. The weight of his words, the truth in his tone, it was too much to carry all at once. She blinked back tears and nodded slowly. Outside, the night was still. The moonlight fell through the window, painting everything silver. She looked around the room, the drawings, the toys, the photos, and realized that this was what she had been missing all along. Not perfection, not certainty, just this. A place where she could be wanted. A place where her love could live, even if it had been broken once before. And in that moment, for the first time in years, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she could be someone's mama after all. The days that followed felt unreal. Each morning she woke up wondering if it had all been a dream, the dinner, the laughter, the small hand that had called her *mama. But every time she saw her phone light up with a message from him, "They're asking if you're coming over again tonight *, she knew it wasn't a dream. It was real, and it was happening faster than her heart could catch up. She started spending more time at their home. At first, she told herself it was just to help. Help with dinner, help with homework, help with anything that made it easier for him. But slowly, the line between helping and belonging began to blur. The kids greeted her now with shouts instead of shy smiles. The youngest would wrap her arms around her waist the moment she walked through the door, claiming her like a prize she'd won. The middle one had started saving her drawings to show her first before anyone else. And the eldest, the quiet one, had begun leaving small notes on the kitchen table. "Thanks for dinner. You make the pancakes better than Dad." Simple words, but they meant more than he'd ever know. Sometimes she'd catch herself just watching them, the way the three of them played, argued, forgave each other within seconds. She marveled at how love could live so freely in children, without hesitation, without fear. She wondered when she had lost that kind of trust in life. And yet, somehow, being around them, she could feel it coming back. One laugh, one hug, one shared story at a time. He noticed it too. One evening while they were washing dishes, he said quietly, "You're different lately." She looked up a bit startled. "Different how?" He smiled, rinsing a plate. "Lighter, like you stopped holding your breath." She thought about that. Maybe he was right. For years, she had lived like she was waiting for bad news. Like happiness was something that could be taken away at any moment. But in this house, with these people, she had started to breathe again, slowly, deeply, without fear. One Saturday morning, the youngest burst into her room, giggling. "Wake up, we're making pancakes." She sat up, blinking at the sunlight. "You are," the little girl nodded. "Daddy said you're the pancake queen." She laughed and followed her to the kitchen, where he stood at the stove pretending to know what he was doing. Batter was everywhere. The kids were trying to flip pancakes and failing spectacularly. She took the spatula from his hand and shook her head. "Step aside, amateur," he laughed, raising his hands in surrender. "Yes, ma'am." The kitchen filled with the smell of vanilla and butter. The kids' laughter bounced off the walls. It was messy and loud and imperfect, and she loved every second of it. When she looked up, she caught him watching her. His eyes held that same calm warmth she'd seen the night she first said she couldn't be a mother. Only now there was something else too, gratitude. Later that day, they went to the park. The children ran ahead, chasing each other through the grass. She and he walked slowly behind, their hands brushing once, then again, until finally they stayed together. The warmth of his fingers against hers felt like an anchor, steady, safe, right. He glanced at her and said softly, "They've been happier since you came around." She smiled faintly. "Maybe they just like pancakes." He shook his head. "No, they like you." She looked away, watching the kids roll down a small hill, their laughter filling the air. "I'm scared," she admitted quietly. "Of what?" "Of messing it up, of not being enough. They deserve someone who knows how to do this. I'm still learning." He stopped walking and turned to her. "So am I every day." The honesty in his voice disarmed her. For the first time, she realized he wasn't trying to be perfect either. He was just trying the same as her. And maybe that was enough. That evening, after dinner, the kids insisted on a movie night. They piled onto the couch, a tangle of limbs and blankets. The youngest crawled into her lap without asking, and the middle one leaned against her shoulder. Halfway through the movie, she felt a small hand reach for hers and squeeze. When she looked down, the eldest was pretending not to look at her, but his fingers didn't let go. Something warm spread through her chest, something deep and unfamiliar. It wasn't the sharp, painful ache of longing she used to feel when she saw families in movies. It was gentler, steadier. It felt like home. When the movie ended and the kids were asleep, she stayed on the couch. The house was quiet except for the hum of the fridge and the ticking of the clock. He came and sat beside her, not saying anything. For a while they just sat in silence, both watching the flicker of light from the TV. Finally, she spoke. "Do you ever think she'd be okay with this?" Her voice was barely a whisper, but he understood who she meant. He looked at her, his expression soft. "She'd be grateful," he said. "She want them to be loved, she want me to be happy, and I think she'd like you." Tears welled in her eyes. "You really think so?" "I know so." She leaned her head on his shoulder, and for the first time it didn't feel like she was stepping into someone else's story. It felt like she was helping write a new one. As the days turned into weeks, she started to notice little changes in herself. She laughed more. She stopped flinching at the word family. She even began keeping a small notebook, scribbling thoughts she couldn't say out loud. One page simply said, "Maybe love isn't about giving birth. Maybe it's about being brave enough to show up, even when you're scared." Every evening when she tucked the kids into bed, she'd whisper good night and linger for a moment, just to listen to their breathing. In those quiet seconds, she could feel something sacred, a bond not made of blood but of choice. One night, as she turned off the hallway light, the youngest mumbled sleepily, "Love you, Mama." The word no longer felt foreign or fragile. It felt like it had finally found its place, and so had she. Morning sunlight spilled softly into the house, painting golden lines across the wooden floor. She stood in the kitchen, the hum of the coffee maker steady, the smell of toast and butter filling the air. The rhythm of mornings had changed. It used to be quiet, just her, the echo of her own thoughts, and the ticking clock that reminded her of time passing too slowly. Now the house stirred with life. Laughter came from down the hall, tiny feet thudded on the floor, and someone was calling, "Where's my other sock?" She smiled without thinking. This chaos was beginning to feel like peace. She caught her reflection in the window, hair messy, wearing his old shirt, a coffee cup in hand. For a second, she almost didn't recognize the woman looking back. Not because she looked different, but because she looked alive. The woman who once whispered, "I can't be a mother," now woke up to 3 voices calling her name or something close to it. Sometimes it was Ma, sometimes Maya, sometimes just a sleepy mumble. Every version of it felt like a miracle. He came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "They're planning something," he whispered against her ear. "Something?" she asked, turning slightly. He nodded. "A surprise. I heard them whispering about it last night. You're not supposed to know," she laughed softly. "Then why are you telling me?" "Because," he said, smiling, "you make the best surprised face." She shook her head, but her heart warmed. These small moments, the easy teasing, the quiet mornings, they were the ones she had never dared to imagine. Later that day, the kids insisted she stay out of the living room. She could hear giggles, the sound of paper rustling, and whispers that weren't nearly as quiet as they thought. She stayed in the kitchen, pretending not to listen, though she was dying to know. When they finally called her in, the youngest shouted, "Close your eyes." She obeyed, covering her face with both hands. Little fingers tugged her sleeve, leading her forward. "Okay," one of them said, "now open." When she did, her heart stopped for a moment. On the wall above the couch hung a framed picture, a photo taken the day they all went to the park. She was sitting on the grass, laughing, with the youngest in her lap and the other 2 leaning against her shoulders. He must have taken it without her noticing. Above the photo, in uneven letters cut from colored paper, were the words, "Our family." For a long time she couldn't speak. The children watched her, fidgeting nervously. "Do you like it?" the middle one asked softly. She knelt down and pulled them all into her arms. "I love it," she whispered, and she meant it every word. After they ran off to play, she looked up at him. He was standing by the door, smiling quietly, his hands in his pockets. "You knew about this, didn't you?" "Maybe," he said with a grin. "They wanted to surprise you, said they wanted to make it official." "Official," she repeated, raising an eyebrow. He stepped closer, his voice gentle. "You're not just someone in their lives anymore, you're part of it." Her throat tightened. "I don't know what I did to deserve all this." He took her hands and said softly, "You showed up, you stayed. That's all they ever needed." That night, after the kids were asleep, they sat outside on the porch. The world felt quiet, the kind of quiet that holds peace, not loneliness. She watched the stars flicker above, the same stars she used to talk to when she thought no one was listening. She remembered all the nights she'd whispered to the sky, "Please, just let me belong somewhere." And here she was, not in the place she imagined, but in one she never thought possible. He handed her a blanket, their shoulders touching as they sat in silence. Then, without looking at her, he said, "You know, I used to think love was something that fades when life gets hard. But now I think it just changes shape." She turned to him, curious. "What do you mean?" He looked toward the window, where the kids' drawings still hung, stick figures, hearts, sunflowers. "It used to be something I fought to hold on to," he said quietly. "Now it's something I get to see every day in them, in you, in the way this house feels alive again." Her eyes stung, but she didn't look away. "You gave that back to me too," she whispered. The wind shifted gently, carrying the faint sound of laughter from inside. The youngest must have been talking in her sleep again. She smiled. "You know," she said softly, "I used to think I was broken, that I'd never get to love like this." He reached for her hand, holding it firmly. "You were never broken," he said. "You just needed a story that fit you." They sat there for a while, neither saying much. The night wrapped around them like an old friend, calm and kind. She rested her head on his shoulder, the sound of his heartbeat steady beneath her ear. Inside the house, the photo on the wall caught the moonlight, 5 faces frozen in laughter, one family stitched together by love instead of blood. And though she didn't say it out loud in that moment, she finally understood what he had meant that first night. She couldn't be a mother, not in the way she once dreamed. But somehow, without planning it, without forcing it, she had become one anyway to 3 small souls who had already decided she was. And as the wind brushed softly through the trees, she realized something else too. Love had found her not through miracles or magic, but through ordinary days, warm kitchens, sticky pancake mornings, and quiet good nights. It wasn't the life she expected. It was something better, something real.